objectives, the top line objective was to focus on small and medium farms, both from a technological perspective, from a business model perspective. We have a representative from Politecnico Milano whose team focused on that. And my team's work here has been on the governance and the framing conditions that enable the support of small and medium farms. So I'm going to give an overview and be a little bit provocative. I'm then going to hand over to Alexandra to talk in detail about the code of conduct. So the enshittification of European Union agriculture. Am I? Yeah, I'm.
Can someone confirm that they're sharing the right presentation?
We haven't seen a change of presentation yet, I don't think.
Okay. Right. Oops, no. Oh. Like that when you do publish. Here we are. Okay.
Yes.
You should. Right. This should be the start of my presentation. Okay. All right, the enshittification of EU agriculture. The concept, I don't know how familiar you are all with the concept of enshittification. It comes from the Canadian analyst and science fiction writer Cory Doctorow. It describes a situation where platforms are very good to start with and over time enshittify in order to extract maximum rent from, on the one hand, the users, on the other hand, the clients, and finally, basically from the whole ecosystem to the advantage of the platform owner. There are many examples. The classic ones are Facebook and Amazon. There are plenty of others. And all business areas where digital platforms dominate are likely to have this happen. So my question here, and I throw this as a provocation to the audience and to my colleagues here, is how can this be avoided in the EU agricultural sector as we move to a greater role for digital technologies in the sector, as we move to having ever more platforms used in various capacities? How can we avoid this? What can we do structurally, legally, in the design of the market in order to prevent this, especially from the perspective of small and medium-sized farms who are inherently disadvantaged in the power they have in the market and disadvantaged in areas like the digital divide, their knowledge of their rights, of their capabilities, and that sort of thing. So this is a fundamental question which kind of underlies the whole approach that we've taken in Farmtopia. Let's look at the big picture. I think Umberto has given us a particularly good perspective from the perspective of Copa Cogeca and the perspective of their desire to support farmers. But it also kind of, the perspective doesn't question any of the fundamental assumptions in this area. So you see in the last 15, 20 years a growing interest in the digitalization of agriculture. You have various forces which are pushing this to happen. You've got agri-tech providers, so a lot of technology companies have entered the space. This has been very much supported by the European Commission, both in research projects and various subsidies. So they've kind of seen this as the creation, if you like, of a new industry of agri-tech providers that can offer a service to the agricultural sector. You've got startups, you've got SMEs, you've got quite a lot of interest from big tech as well. You see initiatives from big global technology players as well. So there's a lot of activity there. Then you see it academically. You see many authors have seen digital tools as addressing or solving many agri-food problems. Let's say, for example, Sjaak Wolfert's paper on big data in smart farming is a classic example. There are many, many such papers which argue really if we adopt digital technologies, we will solve problem A, B, C in the agricultural sector. And then there's the push from the European Commission. A lot of its initiatives, from research funding to the introduction of reporting rules in the Common Agricultural Policy, funding for training and infrastructure, both soft and hard. And we will talk about that a little bit later. So that's the kind of big picture if you look at it from the last 10, 20 years. You can point to specific projects like the ICT Agri project, the partnership, which started, I think, in 2008, one of the original ones, and now is in its third, almost fourth incarnation, as being a kind of reflection of this slow, gradual development and the greater importance of this. But there's no great rush for adoption. I mean, compare this with the adoption globally of ChatGPT, OpenAI's in the last 2-3 years, over 1 billion users globally of OpenAgri, right? There is no such comparable reaction in the agricultural sector. There are repeated complaints from agri-tech providers and from academics. There's a kind of atmosphere, why do bleep farmers not adapt our beautiful, shiny toys? I mean, what's wrong with them? So the question is why? There are several approaches possible to this question. Umberto gave us some very nice figures there about the barriers to adoption and that sort of thing. But I think we need to go a little bit deeper than just to describe there are these barriers of adoption, just sort of at a superficial level. Yes, I know there is this barrier, I know there's that barrier, but what's really going on underneath? And so this is what we've tried to do. We're not, Farmtopia has not tried to do surveys. It's not tried to do any of that sort of thing. It's more a philosophical approach of a look at the literature, a look at the experience of the team in various agricultural projects, and getting a feedback from the agricultural sector as well. The objectives. Remember, our focus is on small and medium farms. To consider the governance in Europe around digital technologies, who are they for? Who benefits? Cui bono? Who loses? And in what manner? And this has led to the proposed technology code of conduct text that Alexander will analyze in greater detail. And then to consider the framing conditions for digitalization in agriculture, including the technology code of conduct, I mean, including all those issues around governance, but also general European Commission regulations, subsidy funding, training, and infrastructure. Do they help digitization? Are they sufficient? Do they actually ignore important social and economic factors? And this has resulted in our regulatory and policy document that we've produced. Let's talk about the technology code of conduct briefly. There's a long history. Umberto talked about the code of conduct that was developed by Kopo Kožek and others. It's now almost 10 years. It was published in 2018, so it was developed in 2016, 2017. The idea of codes of conduct has been originally due to the GDPR regulation, and there are actually many different codes in different business areas, from everything from sort of cloud providers to all kinds of things. And there are several codes in the agricultural sector. And it's interesting to note that although there are several codes, it's after we started Farmtopia that it has become clear to us that the European Commission is trying to establish a new, widely accepted, widely acknowledged code. And this is the responsibility now to turn this into reality that's been taken on by the SEEDS project, and that's why they've been invited to give their perspective in this meeting. Motivation for a new code. There are lots of motivations for this code. Umberto mentioned some of them, which I will reiterate, that the world has changed. The world is changing in a lot of interesting ways. One of them is the integration of software, hardware, and data. You can't just produce a code of conduct that just deals with data, because actually it's a multidimensional issue as to what is the farmer using, what is the farmer buying. Are they buying a service? Are they buying a physical object? Are they buying a combination of an object, a software, a service, etc. It's a complex issue. There's also been considerable criticism from academia identifying limitations of the old code and suggesting remedies to that. On the other hand, you have a visible push from the technology providers to control a lot of data. As Umberto mentioned, the data from one farm is of no great significance or value. The data of many farms has much greater value. And so there is a push, particularly from the technology providers, to have greater control over this. And this, of course, then raises issues of balance of power and so on and so forth. And then you come to as I mentioned already, the audible resistance from the farming community, the complete lack of interest for large parts of the agricultural sector in this. It's interesting to note, for example, that even in dairy robots, which is one of the oldest digital technologies in agriculture. I mean, we've had automated farming, automated milking parlors now for well over 15 years. 20 years, yeah. And the uptake is, I think the latest figures I saw were like 25, 30% of farms have adopted that. It depends on the year, it depends on the country. Yeah. But it's incredibly low. And remember, dairy is a relatively profitable area of agriculture overall. So you would expect the funding would be there to do that. Filippo is putting up his hand. Say what you have to say, Filippo.
In some case, you have 100%. If you look at the tools, IoT tools, in order to check the single cow, okay, because in that case, the farmer understood very well the benefit. So they understood that if they spend 50 euros per cow, for 10 years, they are able to save money, to control the cow, and not lose money because they are losing control of the cow and so on. In that case, they adopt. That's the key, in my point. Because if you show the benefits, they adopt. They are smart guys, they are entrepreneurs, they don't have time. That's why cooperatives are really important to explain why digital innovation. But if they understand that digitalization can help to reduce the burden administrative or to do their work better, right now I can check my cows, what they produce.
But Filippo, you are representing a reasonably successful big farm in Italy. I think this is not true in a lot of parts of Europe where they are. Dairy farms are much smaller, and the general knowledge and access is much lower.
I agree with you. We have differences in adoption, so maybe we can look at those differences to overcome the barriers and the problems. I think, but we can discuss later. Okay. Because, as Umberto Di Pasquo said, there is a huge diversity in production, services, technologies. There's a mess in technology because we have plenty of different digital solutions, but we have something common in the farmer. They are looking for benefits. Okay.
I'm not disagreeing with you. Okay. Anyway, my point was that this you can phrase it as huge variability in adoption, but you can also look at it and see it in many contexts as a real resistance to adoption. I mean, I've heard of talking particularly about dairy farmers saying, I do not want to automate because I still want to talk to my cows. So that is a very basic emotional desire from the farmer. They do not want to be distanced from their cows by the technology.
Yeah, let me say, we have already experienced this. Also with the e-commerce. Okay. My wife said the same for e-commerce, but now she understood the benefit of e-commerce. She's buying on online because I want to have an interaction with a real person to buy this cloth. But then she understood the benefit 3-4 years ago, and then she's using it. So I understand the problem, but we have plenty of experiences in digitalization that can help us to understand how to. Yeah, of course, we can change the agenda of the farmer. Farmers don't have time, so we have to find a way to explain them. Okay,
Filippo, you
talk
can...
a bit, yeah.
The core principle of our approach is, above all, that farmers should have control of their data. Various principles follow from this, such as interoperability and preventing vendor lock-in. Alexandra will go into greater detail about this. But that is the core principle that we are arguing, in contrast to existing initiatives, which basically place the locus of control elsewhere. And that is our hope, at least in the approach that we're taking, that it would shift the willingness. Umberto mentioned as well the issue of trust and fear of what will happen to their data. We would argue that by changing the locus of control, we will change the willingness of a large section of the agricultural community in choosing to use technology. Let's talk about briefly the existing policy and regulatory framework affecting the digitization of agriculture. There's a lot of political and economic motivations for this push. It's consistent with a long history of a push for innovation in agriculture. We can go back over 150, nearly 200 years to a variety of innovations in agriculture, from the introduction of external fertilizers. Some of you may or may not remember the import of guano in the 1830s for agriculture, the introduction of seeds as external to the farming, to the actual farm, pesticides and so on. We've had successive waves of external inputs to the farm. And digitization is definitely the latest in that successive waves of innovation, for good or for bad. We have technological infrastructure. There is hard infrastructure that is absolutely necessary to the agricultural sector, such as broadband access, and there is soft infrastructure, projects like Modern Archis, Attractis, or even the EU Farm Book. Also initiatives like the competence centers and the digital innovation hubs. These are all soft areas of support that create an ecosystem, an environment that supports the development of agriculture, of digitalization in agriculture. So the hard infrastructure refers to things like IoT sensors, drones, robotics, and satellite systems. Remember, these have been developed often for other reasons, but they're looking for opportunities to be used also in agriculture. You look at precision farming tools supporting monitoring, automation, and productivity. This is what Filippo was just mentioning, of monitoring the cow. And significant public and private investment in digital agricultural technologies. Really, here we're talking about things generally that you can pick up or manipulate in one way or another, as opposed to the soft infrastructure, which concerns training programs and advisory services. I've mentioned the digital innovation hubs, the government's frameworks, and things like codes of conduct, and capacity building for farmers and advisors. And if the capacity is not there, that is the actual knowledge and understanding of the technologies, it's very unlikely to get adopted. So there's been all this, and this you can see in lots and lots of different initiatives at national level and at European level that have been supporting this general direction of travel. There are publicly or commercially available data sets. EU government policy, EU data policy promotes data availability, interoperability, and data sovereignty. And there is a strong support for the creation of data sets that should be used by the agricultural sector. There's the European strategy for data supports a single market for data, and the common European data spaces, again, is part of that. Public data sets are increasingly used to support digital agriculture and innovation and provide some kind of evidence base for policy. All these data sets can enable innovation, but they must be usable, interoperable, and accessible to small and medium farms, which is not necessarily obvious that they are. Legal structures and informal codes. There are lots and lots of legal structures which create the conditions for deploying digital agriculture, define rules on data access, intellectual property, privacy, and responsibility. There are the formal instruments like the Data Act, the Data Governance Act, the GDPR, and other EU digital and data regulations. And there are informal instruments such as the Codes of Conduct, which is not just the agriculture ones. There are all the other ones that are also relevant very often, like the use of cloud services and things like that, all of which support responsible data sharing. Responsible, we can put a question mark over that, and help farmers, we hope, maintain control over their data within the wider agricultural data ecosystem. Here is a series of EU instruments. These are all things that we analyzed in our deliverable in this area, looking at how this interacts with the agricultural sector, things like GDPR, competition law, the Data Governance Act and the Data Act, the AI Act, and so on. These are all considered from the perspective of the agricultural sector and the likely implications of this on the activity of farmers. If you look at the informal governance, the codes of conduct and the sectorial initiatives, you see quite a lot of activity across the EU in various sectors. So there's a lot of contribution here that is developing. There's a lot of efforts to make it more effective, to create a more effective economy. So you've got on the one hand the Code of Conduct. You've also got things like the Open Data Charter, which promotes open, timely, and accessible, interoperable, and usable data. And this is something that you find again and again in whether it's in the science area, like the EU Open Science initiatives, or whether it's in the commercial sector. Data needs to be reusable, data needs to be accessible, needs to be appropriately labeled and findable. So we also have subsidies, and this is an interesting sub-area of pressure on the farming sector. I think Umberto briefly mentioned this. So EU subsidies remain a major policy instrument in shaping the agricultural sector, whether intentionally or unintentionally. It's quite often kind of not clear how intentional the eventual result is. People have good ideas to start with, and then they don't realize what the consequences will be afterwards. But one of the major aspects here is the Common Agricultural Policy and its desire to have more reporting. And the reporting forces the agricultural sector to digitize in order to make that reporting possible. Often because there's a huge cost to data collection and data sharing with government or international authorities. EU initiatives, both on the research side and on the subsidy side, are pushing farmers to digitize in order to make that possible. I should note here that I have also encountered significant sectors of the farming community, which may or may not be on the horizon of Copa Cogeca, who are basically opting out. They're not participating in the subsidy regime, and therefore not subject to those kind of pressures that lead to digitization, often for various political reasons. Peter is shaking his head, but we will see. Okay, let's look at some of the issues and challenges that arise out of this. I know I'm running over time slightly, but I will eat a little bit out of Parnas's time, I think, if I'm allowed. There are significant reasons why adoption for mature technology, even dairy robots, is quite low. There's an insufficient evidence of profitability, right? Even though there are some academic papers that argue very strongly for a great increase in productivity or lowering of costs, the actual evidence base for those numbers is questionable. So there's a lot of work here that needs to be done to actually show that there is a cost benefit in adopting digital technologies. Some of it is obvious and some of it is less obvious. But overall, particularly as the farms get smaller in scale, it becomes more questionable what the benefit is. A large farm it makes financial sense to make the investment, to spend the money and get the benefits. The smaller the farm. The complexity of usage, it's very difficult, both a standalone program or the interaction between various apps. So if you talk to Irish farmers, they will say, we've got 20 apps on our phone, they don't talk to each other. It's very strange. That is a problem. And if you look at some of the big agricultural technology providers, I was speaking to one in the Netherlands a couple of years ago, and they say, well, our complex integrated farm management system, nobody buys, but the simple online visualization of people's farms and what they're growing and what their neighbors are doing, everybody likes. It's got to do with the complexity and the effort that is involved in using that thing. And above all, lack of training. I mean, the vast majority of farmers do not have the time or the interest to get their expertise up to a level at which they can actually use these tools. So while there is strong political, technological, and financial support for greater digitization of the agriculture, there are concerns. Some of these concerns, Umberto mentioned trust, privacy, and data security. Farmers remain concerned about who accesses, uses, and benefits from the data. Data sharing may increase risks for business confidentiality and personal privacy. And this sometimes often comes from a matter of principle. It's not a question of they actually have evidence of this. It's just a matter of instinct and feeling. What will happen to my data? Something that's generally ignored by the sector, I find it's amazing, but cybersecurity risks are growing as farms become bigger, more complex, more dependent on extended services outside of the farm. Cybersecurity seems to be really ignored, and this is an important aspect that should raise question marks as to how one manages the dependence on digital systems. Digitalization should not be treated as automatically beneficial. It requires safeguards for trust, autonomy, resilience, cybersecurity, and sustainability. And then there is a kind of aspect of surveillance agriculture in power. A range of farmers are resisting precision agriculture for fear of surveillance. At the simple level, they don't want people looking over their shoulder and knowing what they're doing. But at a deeper level, we're talking about appropriating the decision-making of farmers, transferring it to some external actor, and therefore it's a question of power. IoT platforms threaten to put farmers at an even greater disadvantage due to power imbalances. And data collection is seen as intrusive and thus provides a strong motivation for resisting adoption. And here I must stress there's a huge variety in farmers' reaction. So I've spoken to farmers in France who really are frustrated with multiple platforms that they don't have access to their data. And I've spoken to farmers in Lithuania who say, we don't care, we just want our better productivity and we don't care what the data happens to the data. So I'm not trying to create a blanket picture here. I'm just saying there's a huge variety of responses depending on communities and their experience and their general attitudes. Then there are issues about environmental sustainability, energy consumption, and impact. Remember, the agricultural sector has the biggest environmental footprint of any sector in the world. If you can consider food and agriculture as a whole, it's over 30% in terms of greenhouse gases, not to talk about the impact on biodiversity and things like that. So a major part of the promise of digitalization of agriculture has been that these technologies would significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions and impacts on biodiversity. That's been the part of the selling point of these technologies. But then we have to look at, providing an agricultural digital solution includes a whole complex supply chain that has to exist both in the production of the hardware and the ongoing provision of data centers to provide the cloud-based solutions. Think of all the reaction now against data centers around Europe and globally. The more we digitize agriculture, the more we will be dependent on external data centers that will provide the decision support. So these are things to consider when you're looking at the overall environmental impact of digitization. And then sort of something I've mentioned previously is that information technology is an external dependency, increasing the farmer's dependence on an external provider of data and decision. It creates a major single point of failure, and the dangers at the same time is that farmers lose the technical skill or the agronomic knowledge because they've handed it over to somebody else, basically. So these are all issues. So implications and policy guidelines. This is very briefly the kind of indications we've provided in our reports. We need to provide targeted training, and this really echoes very much what Umberto was saying. Targeted training and advisory support for small and medium farms. We need to improve rural connectivity with smallholder needs in mind. We need to address the digital divide by tackling both low literacy and poorly designed tools. Poorly designed tools is a major issue. I mean, you know, all these computer scientists say, look at my fantastic tool. And the farmer says, how the hell do you use it? Building trust to ensure that farmers have control of their data and transparent governance. Clarifying ownership, power relations, and responsibilities in a digital agriculture environment. Ensuring data creates the data sharing creates definite benefits for farmers. You can't just ask farmers to share their data with other people without being very explicit as to what the benefit is. And we need to simplify the legal frameworks to strengthen farmers' control and reduce complexity. So in conclusion, we have a technical landscape of legal and societal framing conditions that support greater digitization. The EU provides extensive kinds of support, both direct and indirect. We can challenge how effective that is or how well designed that is, but it still exists. This takes the form both of a stick and a carrot. It's both forcing farmers in this area and encouraging them. The general political momentum across Europe is for greater digitalization of agriculture. How much this will benefit small-scale farmers or is an open question, and will it just add more pressure? I mean, we are on the one hand dealing with a huge consolidation in the agricultural sector, which a lot of people are objecting to or regretting. It's an ongoing phenomenon. But we still have a huge number of farms across Europe with very small, I think the figures are still correct to say 50% of EU farms are under 5 hectares and 70% are under 20 hectares. So in sheer terms of numbers, we're dealing with a very large community of people who may be part-time farmers as well, rather than full-time farmers. Okay, that brings my talk to an end, and I now hand over to Alexandra.
Okay. Hello, everyone, from my side as well, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Alexandra Slanidou, and I'm a legal and ethics advisor for Green Supply Chain Digital Innovation Hub. I will present to you now the proposed technology code of conduct that we developed within the Farmtopia project, aiming to support a fair, transparent, and farmer-centered digitalization in agriculture. So what we have done so far is that we have developed a new code of conduct for the agritech sector. It's a technology code of conduct that covers data, software, and hardware. Its main difference from the previous one back from 2018 on agricultural data sharing by contractual agreement by COPA, COGECA, SEMA, and many others is that this one is a farmer-focused governance instrument for the adoption of agricultural digital solutions, marking a shift from data-only governance to technology governance. You may scan the QR code that you see in the slide to have access to the full text of the code. I'd like to mention here that its updated version is currently being finalized and will be delivered next month, and will include the model contracts, certification, compliance mechanism, and feedback that we received from all the workshops that we conducted with the Farmtopia SIPs. So what is a code of conduct and where do they come from? I'm confident that most of you are familiar with the concept of a code of conduct, that it was promoted by the General Data Protection Regulation. It's an informal set of rules about how to behave, and this becomes the accepted way of behaving and doing business. Codes of conduct are not yet legally binding. They complement EU regulations and provide flexible solutions, but they tend to be through compliance mechanisms and certification motivations. So why are we talking about a new code of conduct? The previous one dates back to 2018. It was a well-received action from COPA, COGECA, and many other agricultural stakeholders who shared their vision about data sharing and value sharing. But according to different academic analysis, there were limitations to that code, including its voluntary nature. It didn't include enforcement mechanisms. The data lock-in and portability issues were not addressed. Data rights and ownership were unclear, and all these together with the lack of transparency of benefit sharing and fear of administrative burdens caused mistrust. Together with all the previous mentioned issues, the world has changed since 2018. Lots of new data-related regulations, new technologies, and wider societal questions and perceptions have emerged. Modern agricultural digital solutions combine data, software, hardware, artificial intelligence, and cloud services, and there is interdependency between data, software, and hardware that has to be addressed. Additionally, farmers often face legal complexity, weak bargaining power, and non-transparent technology ecosystems. And there is also the case that technology providers may think that they should control a lot of the data. Here you may see the core principles of our approach within Farmtopia. Targeting to translate policy objectives into practices for the stakeholders, the interested stakeholders. So what we aimed for was to protect farmer autonomy and control over farm-generated data, scale down power imbalances between farmers and agri-tech providers, maintain interoperability with conventional software, avoid the issue of the vendor lock-in, provide a practical benchmark for responsible agricultural digital solutions, and strengthen trust as a requirement for digital uptake. The proposed technology code of conduct for the agricultural sector includes several analytical chapters on legal, social, and technological context. Its main chapter provides the new code with specific articles that detail the potential rules for data access, control, and portability, data protection and transparency, hardware and the right to repair, software and interoperability, liability and intellectual property rights, rights and obligations per role, and monitoring and compliance. Let me walk you briefly through the structure of the technology code of conduct. First of all, we defined its scope, that it will cover data, software, and hardware. Next, the question was which values will guide the code, and this led us to a farmer-centered value, impact, and expected governance approach. Privacy and security issues require particular attention, and this is why we have a dedicated section addressing confidentiality, personal data protection, cybersecurity, and transparency. Following, the specific articles of the code explain how these objectives can be operationalized into practice and set the operational rules for data, roles, access, portability, software, hardware, and the right to repair. Following, beyond protecting data, we need also to clarify responsibilities. The liability and intellectual property rights section allocates responsibilities for misuse, breaches, harm, and innovation ownership. Finally, no code of conduct could be effective without a mechanism to assess whether its principles are actually being followed. This is why in the monitoring and compliance section, we define adherence, monitoring, complaints, and certification logic. Referring to the scope of the code, it covers data, software, and hardware as interconnected elements of agricultural digital solutions governance. It applies to agricultural digital services providers and agricultural technology manufacturers. It is designed primarily for the benefit and the use of the farmers and not only the providers. Adherence to the code may be declared by providers for products or services they market, and the code aims to simplify contractual data processing and access arrangements. The Technology Code of Conduct prioritizes smallholder and medium-sized farms at risk of digital exclusion, and its core value is to support a farmer-centered, equitable, and sustainable digitalization. Governance should be participatory, transparent, and resistant to corporate capture. Training, capacity building, and expert advisory services are needed, but trust cannot rely on the farmer expertise alone. Together with all these, joint actions are needed to build proper digitalization infrastructure and commit to a data-empowered agricultural sector, and the levels of accountability and contractual clauses need to be clearly defined. Clear data classification allows proportionate rules for sharing, reuse, or benefits. So this is why we included product-generated data, raw agricultural data, processed and derived data, personal business confidential data require enhanced safeguards, and the fair data principle should be followed where reuse is intended without burdening farmers. In the Technology Code of Conduct, we defined roles rather than fixed actors due to the fact that one organization may perform several functions. So key roles identified in the code are the technology providers, the data generators, aggregators, processors, custodians, and users. Additional roles included are the service providers, data exchange facilitators, regulators, and oversight bodies. In this way, we aimed to avoid strict legal categories and reflect the complexity of agricultural digital solution business models. Now I will refer specifically to articles, some key articles of the code, starting with the data access and users control. Data generators should access product generated and raw agricultural data collected through their equipment and platforms. Providers must make relevant data available in structured, machine-readable formats. The use beyond the contracted service requires clear contractual authorization. Aggregated or anonymized secondary use of the data should be disclosed and subject to prior consent, and access mechanisms must prevent lock-in and support fair competition. Fair data sharing agreements prevent hidden monetization issues and ensure purpose-specific sharing. This is why farmers and general data generators should determine who can access and use their data. The data sharing agreements must specify the purpose, duration, recipients, conditions, and revocation routes. Restrictive licensing should not prevent farmers from sharing or benefiting from their own data. Third parties must preserve confidentiality, integrity, and agreed purpose limitation, and farmers should be able to refuse unfair terms that create imbalance or harm their business. A key concern identified throughout our work was the issue of the vendor lock-in. Data generators should be able to transfer data across platforms without technical, legal, or financial barriers. Historical records and operational insights should not be lost when switching providers. Providers should use IP's standardized interfaces and interoperability frameworks. Data migration should not involve excessive costs or unreasonable delays, and the fair data principles must be followed to ensure practicality of interoperability. Coming now to the privacy and data protection obligations, we aimed to establish safeguards that govern collection, use, storage of data, and in parallel be compliant with the relevant EU legal framework. Some of the provisions that we included refer to the providers that have to comply with applicable data protection laws and privacy safeguards. Farmers should receive clear, understandable terms before data collection and use. Consent should be explicit, informed, and unambiguous when required. Farmers should be able to withdraw their consent, request correction or deletion, and receive breach notifications. And security audits and privacy by design must become standard practice. Trust requires transparency and informed participation. And this is why farmers should know why their data is collected, how it is stored, and who can access it. Policy changes and new uses should be communicated and occur only when agreed with the farmers. Farmers should be able to request records of the entities accessing their data. Third-party access must be governed by legally binding arrangements, and periodic transparency reports should explain use, access, incidents, and policy changes. Beyond transparency, data and digital infrastructure still remain vulnerable to cyber threats. This is why the cybersecurity and risk mitigation section specifies that technology providers should implement encryption, multi-factor authentication, and secure storage, and promptly notify affected stakeholders. Early detection and incident response systems should be in place. Access controls must be robust and enforceable. Backup and recovery systems are needed for accidental loss, cyber attacks, and system failures, and third-party collaborators should meet equivalent cybersecurity standards. Privacy and security are critical issues, and this brings us to the broader section referring to principles for securing farmers' data and ensuring responsible data practices. Farmers' data should be treated confidentially and protected through technical and organizational measures. The adoption of the data minimization principle requires providers to collect only what is necessary for the intended service. Anonymization should be used for research and analytics whenever feasible. Consent and withdrawal should be operationally meaningful and not merely formal. Security and privacy safeguards should preserve both legal compliance and trust. Now, data portability prevents the digital lock-in, and the right to repair prevents the technological lock-in. This is why data generators, including farmers, agribusiness, and cooperatives, should have the right to maintain and repair their own agricultural equipment. Providers should grant access to diagnostic tools, firmware updates, repair manuals, and security patches. Restrictions on embedded software must be justified by safety, security, or regulatory grounds. IP and trade secrets should never be used to prevent the right to repair. And what the code aims for is to prevent repair-related vendor lock-in. The fair repair agreements part of the code that we included aims to increase transparency, legal certainty, and fairness in repair-related agreements. Repair conditions should be defined clearly in purchase, service, and software licensing agreements. Parts, tools, and diagnostic software should be available under fair and transparent terms. Farmers should be able to authorize independent third-party repair and maintenance. Contracts should distinguish legitimate intellectual property protection from unfair repair restrictions. Repair policies should support competition in agricultural service markets. Unfair repair restrictions may undermine practical exercise of the right to repair. This is why the code discourages encrypted diagnostics or proprietary tools that block lawful repair. Mandatory use of authorized facilities should not be imposed without objective justification. Independent repairers should have access to essential updates and calibration tools. Restrictions may be justified only for safety, cybersecurity, regulatory compliance, or legitimate trade secret protection. The objective is a good faith cooperation between providers, manufacturers, service providers, and farmers. Moving on to the software and interoperability section of the code, agricultural software embedded systems and platforms should remain transparent, accessible, and interoperable. Systems should work across brands, services, and data environments. Restrictions should be limited to genuine security, safety, or integrity needs. Software design should support portability from the start, and the aim is to support an open agricultural technology ecosystem. Value of the agricultural digital solutions often depends on access to software features and licensing. This is why data generators, data aggregators, and authorized actors should have fair access to key software features that affect productivity and sustainability. Essential functions should not be blocked by unfair paywalls, proprietary controls, or restrictive licensing. Premium features may be licensed separately, but terms must be clear. Contracts should define pricing, compatibility, access conditions, and cross-brand restrictions, and software-generated insights should be governed transparently. The ultimate goal is to avoid lock-in and support open standards by securing that agricultural digital solutions remain open, interoperable, and farmer-centered. Providers should not prevent switching, independent analytics, repair, or third-party interoperability. Licensing agreements should clarify ownership, use rights, and continuity after equipment or provider changes. Open and standardized framework should be encouraged across the sector. What the Technology Code of Conduct seeks is to make vendor lock-in structurally difficult, and what is needed is industry collaboration to solve interoperability and licensing challenges. The liability and intellectual property rights part of the code clarifies responsibilities for data handling, breaches, value generated through data, and innovation. Contracts should clearly allocate responsibility for data accuracy, security, misuse, and breach response. Farmers should not be liable for damages caused by provider system failures or data leaks. Terms excluding liability for intentional acts or negligence should be treated as unfair. Intellectual property ownership and use rights should be defined before data sharing begins. And where provider innovation relies on farmers' data, fair benefit sharing should be considered. Each role in the Technology Code of Conduct receives both rights and obligations. We tried to create a balanced ecosystem. For example, technology providers have IP rights and monetization, but they have duties of interoperability, repairability, security, and portability. Data generations have the right to access, control, portability, and repair rights, but they have duties of traceability and responsible sharing. Aggregators, processors, and custodians have operational rights, but strong duties on consent, security, transparency, and deletion. Finally, regulators and oversight bodies may establish and monitor data governance frameworks, ensure compliance and provide certification and complaint handling responsibilities, but they have to prevent bias issues. Now, the final question that we had during the development of the Technology Code of Conduct was how to assess in practice adherence to the code. A monitoring body should assess and verify adherence to the Technology Code of Conduct. We have to establish procedures to handle complaints about infringement and, where necessary, apply sanctions. Different levels of adherence or certification marks should be introduced, and governance should include a strong independent component to prevent corporate capture. Now, I would like to conclude by reflecting on the code's policy relevance and next steps. The Technology Code of Conduct can operate as a practical benchmark for responsible agricultural digital solutions deployment. It can inform funding, procurement, accreditation, data space governance, and advisory services. Farmer participation must remain central during refinement and implementation, and the code can help align innovation with trust, fairness, and digital sovereignty. Thank you all for your attention. We look forward to your comments and feedback that will be valuable for the code's finalization and future implementation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. That was very efficient. You're ahead of time. And you've sent everybody else to sleep. Remember, Alexandra has a legal background as a lawyer, so all this is very legalese, but it's very important. Each one of these statements are reflected in the code and are things that one should, if one had the time and energy, to sit and argue and see what the consequences are. So these are important points to bear in mind. Francesco, you wanted to say something?
Test. Yes, it works. Here it works. Yeah.
So the question from my side would be regarding this.
People online. I think it's necessary.
Okay.
People online.
All right. So what I wanted to ask is, especially regarding this monitoring of the compliance and the setting up of a body that ensure that, let's say, the code of the contracts are respected, because being given the nature of the code of conduct and which is different to a regulation where there is already a system in place in case of not respect of certain rules, how this could work, because in the text you refer to this approach of having this body, but also to the risks that can emerge from having this a really independent.
Well, the issue there is if you don't have some kind of compliance or enforcement mechanism, people will just ignore it. And I think there are other codes of conduct that are very clear as to the mechanism of compliance. And I think it boils down to the fact that it's a right to access to market, so to speak. If you want to be part of the ecosystem, you have the ecosystem has to basically say you follow these rules, otherwise you're out of the picture, and that can be done without legal constraints. It can be in effect a matter of consensus. But it's an issue working that out and working out how to make sure that functions effectively is. I completely recognize it as a problem, as a challenge.
So how do
I don't think the old code of conduct had any enforcement mechanisms, but I know that several other code of conducts do have enforcement mechanisms, which actually that is a chapter that still needs to be fully written in a new version.
Does this work? Okay. But first of all, thank you for the excellent work. Thank you. So Seth van Holland, Data Governance Unit, Agri A4. So I see a lot of strong links with the, let's say, the work that we're currently preparing on the business wallet. So our Director General has it very high up on our agenda, and as we speak, we're let's say, really preparing actions for after the summer. And so for me, there are very clear links with your, let's say, the rant against platforms, which I completely share. And I think already since 4 or 5 years, we see this, or we hear, and I also say the mantra of no platforms or protocols over platforms. So I think as a community, and there's probably also a role for the Commission there to play, to invest on common protocols, and this is also completely in line, I think, with the vision and the architecture of seeds. And there also there's a clear link with the business wallet, where we want interoperable, open, standardized architectures based on protocols. And probably there's an interesting discussion to be had on how the new version of the code of conduct could also, let's say, play a role within the preparation of the business wallet. So it's very relevant and important work, and we need to let's say talk more in the months to come.
Well, we are at your disposal if there's anything we can do to help. And we're happy to.
Look, I focused a lot on the business wallet, but for me, so business wallet is all about identity mechanism for economic operators. But then within the agri-food sector, we also see a lot of voluntary uptake now for digital product passports, so DPP. And so
which actually is excluded by the DPP. We see regulation officially. It says we exclude food and agriculture.
Yeah. So for the time being, it's just textiles and batteries, and then the construction sector is the following. In construction sector, we also have wood. So indirectly, there's already a link. But it's interesting to see that in the Netherlands or across member states, there are a lot of kind of initiatives from a purely voluntary perspective. And I think there you have, let's say, the UNTP, United Nations Transparency Protocol, which has already a very specific extension specifically for agriculture, so AATP. And so just like we could talk about this for hours and hours, but I think the common investment in protocols is really key, and we just need to kind of make sure that.
Let me just comment on something here, which is we have to realize that choices here have consequences. So there will be winners and losers across the whole ecosystem. And the European Commission has to be aware of that. I'm sure they are, and you don't need to tell me that. But there needs to be some kind of muscular position, let's put it that way, that you choose certain positions that you're going to support and follow through with the regulation, fully aware that some people are going to complain and deal with the consequences. It may be that you have to deal with the consequences with some kind of compensatory mechanism, some kind of subsidy or something like that. But awareness of that is important here, because otherwise, Filippo. Oh, sorry. Doris, hello.
Yes. So first of all, also thank you for the presentation and the work. So I think one element which was not directly reflected in the presentation, but which I would highly acknowledge, is the stock taking, that you really took stock what is out there across the board. I was wondering a little bit 2 points. So the last point you mentioned, following up with the regulations, that would actually contradict the spirit of a code of conduct. So meaning a code of conduct and the nature you highlight in the document, which is great, the added value of a code of conduct to complement regulation, as you started, let's say, the presentation as well. So, and I think this potential of a code of conduct being more flexible, being more voluntary, to adjust horizontal legislation in a flexible manner to the sector, to have the promotional effects, to build trust, should not be, let's say, undermined and then directly talking about the regulation. You saw the role of the original code of conduct which the Commission took. The Commission had an advisory role to help to interpret the legislation in the right way, to set the minimum benchmark, but the stakeholders agreed on the code of conduct where they go beyond regulation, whom they favor. So you now in your project have a particular focus on small farmers, which is great because probably they would not have the capacities to get involved in such
Exactly.
processes. So they would not invest in expensive lawyers. So, but I think there we need to fine-tune the discussion because a code of conduct has a high value to complement legislation, and it's actually not legislation. So for just naming some examples where also I think the Farmer Code of Conduct is not only to be reviewed because of the Data Act, but also, for instance, technology advancement. It will be rapidly now with AI and software definition. You mentioned the protocols so quickly you cannot adjust legislation. So just to mention some examples, I think it would be great if that would also be reflected in the final deliverable and also maybe in the context of the Data Act, which actually does not foresee additional sectorial legislation to be complemented, but highlights the potential of a code of conduct in the preamble. So I think that you may reflect on also
emphasizing really the flexibility of the code of conduct in responding to changes that are rapid. Yeah.
Yeah, so and for sure the discussion of the enforcement body is, and I totally agree with Francesco, is a critical one. Is reputation or the lack of reputation enough to enforce it? So and that is always the question, and this is difficult to assess because you have different market structures. Because you have along the value chain, you have more oligopolic or less oligopolic market structure, and then the level of reputation or loss of reputation has a higher relevance or lower relevance.
Yeah, I mean, there are definite areas where access to market acts as a strong driver. So, for example, you have to, as a farmer, get global gap certification, which is a very low level of certification in order to sell into, supermarket supply chains at all. And that acts as a fundamental enforcement mechanism at that level. So it's not impossible, but it needs to be thought through and actually designed properly to be effective. I mean, we have no expectation as a project. This is just a set of ideas we're putting there. That's all. I mean, it's just here. If you're interested, fantastic, and we are happy to contribute to your planning and that sort of thing, but it is not, there has no arrogance to it, our approach. Any other comments?
I have one additional point related to the business wallet. I think the link is very valid and it's complementary, but only to clarify the business wallet preparation as a horizontal element in the across sectors will not be based on the preparation of the code of conduct or be informed by the code of conduct. So just to avoid confusion, so what is currently in council and so on, discussed on the business wallet is horizontally concerning all sectors and will probably not be informed by a code of conduct. Then for sure also, let's say DG Agri and DG Connect are looking in sector-specific application cases, and also I think some organizations are involved in testing and piloting in the sector-specific context, but only to avoid confusion, it's, let's say at first instance, what is currently discussed at regulatory level is horizontal legislation.
Is the business wallet different or similar to the digital product passport? I mean, what's the...
Of course, there's the horizontal business wallet, which applies across sectors, connecting horizontal. We've been asked by our DG to develop an agri-food business wallet, which build top of connect work and make it sector specific. So when I refer to the relevance of the code of conduct, I was referring to the sectoral implementation of the business wallet. But the DPP under ESPR is being grown. and it's a completely different animal. So that there you have data clustered around the products, which could be completely decoupled of the grower or the producer, and even from an international trade perspective, you don't really need the identity of the initial producer. But of course, there are lots of business processes and situations where the two will intercollide. So I think it makes sense. And there is now a WTC working group as we speak, working on a common vocabulary for the DPP and the business models.
Okay, so there's a project that already published an ontology for surplus. That's right, ontology for that sector. I don't know how good it is, but right.
Okay. No, I think we have
We better
one more.
move on,
Yeah,
and we can pick it up.
Yeah, we need to go to a coffee break, but there is a person that wants to ask a question from the online participants. Maybe we can have this question, this comment, and then go to the coffee break and then continue, because we do have a discussion later on.
Online person, please ask your question.
Hi, my name is Lady, and thank you very much for taking my question. So I'm a doctoral candidate working with trust and agricultural data sharing. And I would like to know what is the strategy for making this new code of conduct to be aware among all stakeholders, because I interviewed 26 stakeholders in agriculture, including farmers, technology providers, and agribusiness, and they were not even aware of the current code of conduct, which is voluntary. So what is the strategy to make these aware?
Okay, let's be realistic here. This is a relatively small research project funded by Horizon Europe. We have a budget for dissemination and we do promote it, that sort of thing, but we wouldn't expect farmers as a whole to be aware of this. It would need a lot more budget and capacity to communicate this to the farming community as a whole. One of the ways we are communicating it is by having this event at Kopokojeka as one of the potential representatives of the farming community, and therefore hopefully it may filter down that way to the wider sector. In that sense, I'm afraid I have to disappoint you, but that's the realistic answer within an EU project. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm also part of a European project. So in my research, I'm also talking about the codes of conduct. So hopefully I'm going to help as well to make these more aware with the community.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's go to a coffee break now until, Nikos, when? 20 past? Yeah, 20 past. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, online people, we're starting again. A bit late, my apologies. I'm very pleased to welcome Stephanie from ILVO to talk about the SEEDS project and what they're going to do with the Code of Conduct.
The mic is on? Yes. Oh, thank you, Christopher, for the introduction. As you said, I'm a scientific director at ILVO, but I'm here representing our coordination role in SEEDS, and I will tell you more about how we look at this code of conduct and how we will approach that. How can I go to the next slide?
Just press the down button.
Oh, down. Okay. Yes, thanks. First, some words about SEEDS. It's an initiative under Digital Europe. It's 60 million euros, 36 partners in 15 countries. And in the next coming weeks, we will welcome new partners because we just finished the review of our open call. A lot of money, a lot of partners to develop a common European agri-data space with secure and trusted data sharing in our sector. We will promote and facilitate data sharing among all stakeholders, the farmers, but also the agri-food companies, and to share data along the food chain. This will not be a surprise. You need a lot of trust. Farmers do want to share their data, but they want to know who will access the data, the reason why the data need to be shared, and they want to be absolutely sure that the data will not be misused. Same is true for the other stakeholders along the food chain. They also want to share the data, they want to be respectful to the farmer, but they want also have some respect for their data ownership, their effort to collect and process the data, and their IP. So SEEDS is there for all stakeholders. What is the role of the Code of Conduct to build this trust? We started with the same analysis as the Farmtopia team. So we investigated all the EU legislation and also all the sector regulations, also the model contracts in Germany that exist. And we had a look at everything that was already out there. With all this information, we were very ambitious and we tried to create one overall code of conduct. Newsflash, we didn't succeed. We failed. Because we want to be inclusive and we want to deal with everything, including every possible data sharing scenario in this code of conduct, we ended up with an overloaded document with a lot of articles and also a lot of detailed procedures. That means that this document was not very hard to maintain. Every time that in SEEDS something would change on the legal perspective, on the technical perspective, on governance perspective, we need to revise all this code of conduct and go through the approval process again. So that's why we shifted and we came to a code of conduct what was stable and very high level, more on the strategic framework with some core principles and values. So the code of conduct that we propose is more behavior norms and it's about ethics, it's a trust framework, and it should be very stable and a clear reference in case of new versions very occasionally. So the code of conduct shouldn't explain how things work, so it's not an operational document, it's more what is right. How do we want all the stakeholders along the food chain to behave? These are the 11 principles that we came up, and it will not surprise you. It's very in line with the code of conduct from Bioakkerbouw in the Netherlands, with the Farmtopia. So things that are really important are, of course, the data rights of the data right holder, in most cases the farmer. Purpose, who do you want to share the data with, for what purpose, and of course the limitation. Fair value distribution is, of course, important. We want to be very inclusive. We don't want to discriminate. Collective empowerment and all this kind of things. So these are the 11 principles in our code of conduct. But what about the next steps now? So this code of conduct with these high-level ethical principles are now translated into the rulebook. And the rulebook is the operational manual of SEEDS, so of the common data space. So this is the point where the code of conduct is no longer voluntary. If you want to use seeds as a data space, you need to assign and align with these principles because they are translated into the rulebook. In the next steps, we will also develop model contracts. So these are then the templates to execute the rules. So the code of conduct of seeds, high-level behavioral rules, we make it mandatory through the rulebook and the contracts. But as seeds is a data space, we also provide technical interoperability for data sharing. We can go one step further. So we can take technical measures to make sure that no one violates the principles in the code of conduct. And I will give some examples. I will first do this. Give some examples. The first thing is what we do is also what Seth referring. It's trusted identification. And we are at this moment testing the business wallet as a trusted identification to access the data space. That means that we know exactly who is accessing the data, something that's really important in trust. Another example is trusted access policy. So at this moment, it's already possible to attach to every data set a clear access policy. So you know who will access the data and you know exactly the conditions under which the data will be used. Third thing, of course, is consent, my favorite topic. As you all know, in a normal data space, you have a data provider and a data consumer, but agriculture is a bit atypical because the data holder is the data provider. But of course, we all know that the data originator is most often the farm. So he or she should be able to consent the data sharing, and this consent needs to be an informed decision. So next step, what we are working at SEEDS at this moment is to work on this consent, informed consent mechanism and to take both legal and technical measures for that. So SEEDS should ensure this transparency and this traceability, and SEEDS also should balance between data sharing on one hand and on the other hand, of course, this privacy, control and trust. Next question is, okay, who should be managing and organizing this consent within SEEDS? We have the option to do this as the SEEDS authority. We can manage this very centrally, or we can leave it open to the participants and leave it open to the data holders. But if you look at what the farmers want, the answer to this question is very easy, because farmers want to give consent in a platform that they know. They know the people behind the platform, they know they can trust, they know they can call a help desk, they can get support in their own language, not only technical support, but also domain knowledge support. So this is what farmers want. So because of this knowledge, we added an extra layer, and this is what we called in SEEDS the data sharing initiatives. So it's locally anchored. So what is a data sharing initiative? A data sharing initiative are these local data sharing platforms who share the data on behalf of their participants. Some of the data sharing initiatives are data intermediary service providers under the Data Governance Act, but it's mainly facilitating data sharing in your region or in your subsector. So we also have data sharing initiatives only dealing with milk, or we have data sharing initiatives like AHIN only dealing with machinery. Other platforms like Edwin are very regionally organized, like they only operate in Poland. And this data sharing initiative level is the link, the glue, you can say, between the SEEDS authority, so what happens at the EU level, where we create the rule book and the contracts to create EU interoperability, and the application layer, and this is of course the layer where the magic happens, where you can develop new digital tools, have this AI development and really support the farmers. Luckily, in agri-food, we have a lot of these platforms. I mentioned already IDEDEN about milk and AHIN for machinery, but we have John Data in the Netherlands. We have our own platform, Just Connect, in Flanders. And the aim in Seeds is to connect all these different platforms. We want to connect these platforms to create, of course, data interoperability. So we have this Seeds EDC connector put in place at this moment to test the data interoperability. But on the other side, we also want to give the farmer the capability to give consent at his own region and at that level. So keep the data interoperability at EU level, but the farmer consent at regional level. All to build trust. So with this, I hope I give you some insights about how we make this code of conduct mandatory, how we make sure, or we can make sure that you need to respect these rules due to the technical measures that we make, and how we demonstrate and facilitate farmers using the common European agri-data space. All with one goal is to create trust and to facilitate, of course, data sharing across Europe. If you want more information about Seeds or you want to become a member, it's possible. I'm sure that there is a Seeds ambassador in your region, so feel free to contact those people or ask any question you want to me. Thanks for the attention.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Do you have any comments, questions from the audience? Peter.
Question to clarify, if you see the dairy sector or the animal sector, then you see focus on platforms. If you look at the arable sector, that's more difficult because every farmer has a lot of people that he connect organizations that he connects with, so they think of other ways of data storage and how can you connect that in a Seeds initiative?
The biggest problem is not that there are so many platforms or so many tools, but the lack of interoperability between these tools. And in the dairy sector, it's a bit more organized because the farm management information system of the milking machine is leading, and they are connecting everything. In arable farmer, it's more problematic because I visited a farmer 2 weeks ago, and he has 7 farm management information systems. So he has one that he pays for and that he's using, but he's complaining about the limited capacity of this platform. He wants to change, but if he changes to another platform, he will lose 7 years of historical data. Then he has a platform that is given for free by the potato processor, and he has to select all the parcels that he will sell the potatoes to them. Same is true for the sugar beet company. Then he has one for the vegetables, and then he has a class tractor, a fence system, and also an AVR potato harvester.
Yeah, this is like my Irish case of 20 apps on their phone, and they just hate it. I mean, they really are furious about this.
And all these platforms, they say they're interoperable. We try to have one parcel card with this task map and out of one system and incorporate it in the other system. And it took us, together with 11 persons, 45 minutes to do that. So this is problematic, and this is more in arable farming than it is in dairy farming. But still, also there are some very high problems.
So you have a nice map there showing these different data space organizations around Europe, and you're saying you want to connect them up. What kind of data are you imagining will be shared across countries?
Mainly at this moment, sustainability data, because CSRD is top of mind of all the retailers, the companies, the banks. So farmers and also other agri-food companies are asked a lot of data to comply with CSRD or with the science-based targets. It depends on how big the company is. What we see is that, for example, it's a milking company in the Netherlands. They want to have this sustainability data of farmers in the Netherlands, in Flanders, in Wallonia, and in France. and they want to respect the farmer and say, okay, you can use the carbon footprint tool of your region, and you can use the data sharing initiative to give consent, but only if we can access the data in a very easy way. So they want to use the access point of Just Connect, but we need to connect to Join Data, Wallismart, and also to the French platform to facilitate that. So yeah, you can argue, okay, this is a very big company. Do we need to share the data with this very big company? And do we need to facilitate? And you want to support the farmers, of course, but if we don't do this, this company will go to an international carbon footprint tool. This is not appropriate to be used here in Flanders to our farming system, and farmers will also lose. So in my opinion, it's better to work together on the regional level, support these local carbon footprint tools, connect, and give an answer to these international companies.
Because the milking company, so this is a milk technology company? Like
no, it's
a milk processor.
It's a processor, yes. It's a milk processor. There's companies like Campina and Danone, these kind of companies, yes.
And they need to collect that data from the farmers.
In the potato industry, you have also there big potato processor, Farmfrieds, Clarabouts. They need data, and they're not restricted to Flanders. They're located here or located in the Netherlands, but they have farmers in Poland. How to access this data from the farmers in Poland. And this is
in theory, they could do it through Join Data or one of these organizations.
Of course, they can do this, but then they have to solve this spaghetti. So then they will say, okay, but this is too far away, too complicated. We will come up with a new tool, of course, and we will roll them out across Europe.
And the farmers, if they want to contract with that,
and then they're forced to use it.
And then another app on the phone.
And then potato farming in Poland, it's different from the potato farming here in Flanders and potato farming in the Netherlands. The situation is completely different. So then it's better. Also, the climate region is different. So then it's better to use the regional tool and support and do this together.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting, the way the power of certain players has and the consequences that has in adopting specific technologies. So, I mean, a classic example that I quote from the use of standards of interoperability is the Dutch flour industry. There are 12 Dutch flour companies. They agreed a data standard to share data about flours, and because 90% of the world's flour production goes through Amsterdam every day, they could say, this is what you have to do in order to be part of our business, end of. And that was really their market power imposing a standard. There's very few other sectors where we have that situation of, let's say a private set of actors saying, here is our standard, use it, end of story. Somebody wants to say things.
Oh, yeah, first.
No, no, I think in a few months, but I have to check with that work package. I will not. Oh, am I still on? Yes. So I have to check with the work package, but I think in a few months. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Because I also like what you said, Christopher, in your presentation. It's about a carrot and then make it more forced. You can say, okay, poor dairy farmers, they need to share a lot of data with a milk processor, but they got a sustainability bonus out of this. So it's up to them to decide, okay, I will go to that processor or that processor. Okay, you cannot change every month. It's something you do 3 times maybe in your life as a dairy farmer, but at least you can see what the bonus is and act depending on that. And some dairy processors, they put more, or emphasize more the animal welfare, and other put more value in carbon credits or carbon farming. So it's up to you and decide, okay, what is the model that suits most my own business perspective. And I think this is the freedom that a farmer needs to have.
Doris. We're running out of time,
Yeah.
so be quick.
Yes, I'm quick. So I challenge some more persons. So a general question, maybe not only to the projects, but also for the, let's say, for the others in the room. So do you think from a communication perspective that the stakeholders like farmers and so on are aware of the potential of a common European data space and the complexity behind it, or would we need more communication material to make it feasible? Because so even in Germany, if I would not, we have here in the project small farms, but even if I would go to medium-sized farms in Germany, that are about 100, 150 hectares, I would say the complexity of a data space and the potential added value and the way of thinking, even if we would phrase it in light terms without protocols and so on, the strategic dimension is not necessarily clear and the awareness is not there. A question whether, let's say, others share the view or whether you think it's clear to all the stakeholders already. So I think because the added value of a data space to make it feasible, for instance, the example you just explained, okay, sustainability data sharing or in trade relations, also on all the power of farmers in the handling of data or gaining value from data. So are we already at a point that is really feasible to the normal farmer, I would say?
Feasible technically, you mean, or feasible politically?
What is the edit? No, technically, I think you have the good example. The technical assistance is needed from a let's say from an IT perspective and maybe also from a contractual perspective. But is the awareness there for the potential benefit of a data space, no matter how it's called at the end in local language, would be given, and also of a common data space across borders because of the awareness which power international companies
My short answer is no, but Stephanie, what do you think?
Yeah, it's the same answer. Farmers are not aware of data sharing platforms and definitely not aware of the data space, but you have to communicate in real examples. You have to share your data with the bank to get a lower percentage on your loan. Is it more easy if you just have to consent in that platform and the data can flow? Yes, it is. And then they will say, yes, now we have this registration of the protection, plant protection things, how do you say it? Gewasbeschermingsmiddelen. Now we make it easy to register all these products, make it sure that you can just scan the product, it's in your digital tool and you can show it the moment that there is an audit. And if you communicate like farmers with farmers like this, then it's possible. But at this moment, the code on the product is different in the Netherlands and in Flanders. So if you are a farmer that has cross-border land, you have a problem. And we cannot solve this at this moment. So this is where a data space can help. And if you communicate to the farmer, okay, I listen to you very carefully. I know that this is your problem and this is the solution. They will love the data space.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move forward. Panos, thank you very much, Stephanie, for that presentation.
But if I can answer a little bit to that question, because of Doris, because we carry out research EU-wide on digitalization, and no one knows about data space, no one. And as well, the value of data, okay, yeah, interviewing farmers and so on. But that's normal. That's normal. No one knows how internet works, but they use through mobile phone everything. It's like at the beginning of electricity. No one understood electricity. But if you plug something and obtain something, you can obtain a result. The farmers be there, not understanding. Probably in the future, you won't talk about data space. It's only a network. You don't talk about electric network to a farmer. They know that they can receive electricity. They can do something with that. That approach could be the effective one. Okay.
Thank you, Filippo. We now have Panos Elias, who seems to decide to present himself as studying at the business school. So that's what I will.
This is what I'm.
That's what
Okay.
I will pretend
Yeah.
he is. He's many other things, but that's what he seems to be
today-
presenting himself.
This is myself. Well, hello, good morning. Yeah, I'm Panos Elias. I work the last few years at the intersection of digital transformation and interoperability, but also governance. And through my executive MBA at Vlerik Business University, I have been working on a question, on a topic that matters a lot. I also saw it today. How do we understand? How do we assess the value of data? I mean, and today I'm going to present, just to clarify, it's my personal views using my experience. I'm not going to use mathematical formulas and stress Christopher. And I will start directly by explaining the term byproduct. In agriculture, we are performing activities. The primary products that we are aiming, it's not data, it's milk or harvesting. And for that, we are using technology, we're using machines, we're using sensors. But all those activities, due to the technology, they are leaving traces behind. And those traces are data. And the shift, I mean, what I want to discuss today is that at the beginning, we see the data as a records that can show us what has happened in the past. But more and more, we make a shift and we see the data as an economic asset or as an asset that we've managed it correctly, we can receive benefits. I hear many times today the word benefit, also from Stephanie. But it looks like that this can be done only under conditions. I mean, you have to discuss about rights, you have to discuss about capabilities, and of course, you need to discuss about the context. I mean, which is the context you are operating. And what is the linkage between the value of data and the code of conduct that that Alexandra presented today together with Christopher? It's about more or less similar things. The code of conduct, Alexandra Niemann used today financial terms, but in reality, you in the code of conduct, there is a discussion about benefits, about alternative incomes, and the code of conduct, from my perspective, it's also tries to prepare the actors. This can be a role of the code of conduct or the rule book that Stephanie mentioned, the rule books that exist to prepare the actors before they step into data relationships. I'm using this term. And this is what I'm going to discuss today, how we can look at the data as an economic resource and how the code of conduct can help actors think about it and then act. Okay, yeah, sorry, I have 3 screens and it's confusing. I have also used in the past many times, especially while I was discussing with farmers in the middle of 2000, Nikos? Yeah. Phrases or slogans or expressions or statements saying data create value. Well, and I realize also continuing after working at ILVO together with Stephanie that this is something very broad. I mean, at the end of the day, using these statements, you don't support the stakeholders making decisions. By going to the CFO, sorry, Christopher, for using business terms, but if you go to a CFO and you say, I want to make an investment on data, Because data create value, I'm sure you will not receive the money in order to do it. So you need to perform financial justification, and you have, this is not enough, you have to start with the right questions. I think that's the best approach. And first you have to start with the decisions. I mean, which decisions do we need to improve? You have to discuss, after continues from the decision, you have to discuss about the benefit. And you have to be clear about the benefit. What do we mean by benefit? It's about reduce the waste we have in supply chain. It's about better timing. You have to be specific, especially with small farmers and medium farmers. And you also have to start discussing a little bit when does this benefit appears. Because the benefit sometimes is not coming immediately. You may have a benefit after a while, and sometimes also the benefit after a while disappears. And another important question is who is receiving the benefit. It's clear that most of the time the originator or the one that generates data is not the one who's receiving the maximum amount of value. And the topic that I'm working now, it's how to assess it. I mean, how you can put a value, if it is possible, but it's something that we will see after. So in my perspective, the code of conduct is not a moral instruction. It's not something that you go back to the farmers and you start saying, this is what you have to do, that's the right way to do it. It's more about preparing the farmers. I will use the word preparation. You have to prepare them. In my experience, and this is what you also mentioned, it's Stefan and Filippo, I think, especially in Greece, the farmers are smart people. They have great experience from past solutions, the wow solutions that many different agribusinesses present them. And at the end of the day, they will also return back and say, okay, give me the benefit, but give me some numbers about it, and then I can decide. I will continue about giving some, let's say, ways or qualities or practical steps that you need to follow. Again, returning back in the past, while I was working with Nikos, I was working in an agribusiness company, and the goal was to develop some smart farming services. We didn't start by saying, okay, we have this amount of data, we have access to this data resources, let's try to see what we can do. We started from the decision. So the best thing you can do is to start from the decision. You have to start from what you want to develop. I want to develop smart farming services. And then by doing this, you have to be more specific. It's about pest protection or fertilization. You start by doing this, you start asking, develop questions, and the questions leading you to the data that you have to use. And if you use the data, if you have the capability to use the data, you can generate answers, and the answers can improve the decision. And this is how you generate value. You generate value because you can improve your decision. And the message is that after knowing how it works, you have to start and link your activities or your data relations with the purpose, with the context. You don't start entering in data relations just by saying, okay, I have data, let's share them. No, you have to start with the context, what you want to do, what you want to improve. And how the data are working, it's more academic, but it's important for the next slides. The data have one ability, they can reduce the uncertainty. This is how the data can generate value, because they reduce the uncertainty of the decisions. In the slide, you can see that you have a farmer. He wants to understand and make a decision when I have to do something. There are so many different resources. satellite data from the Copernicus, weather stations, measurements, systems that record his activities or the calendar of the farmer. But what that means, all this data, if you use them correctly, you can reduce the uncertainty, and which means you can have better timing, less waste, and lowest risk. This is related to the risk. Another thing is related, and it's important for the farmers to understand this. The data has two extra qualities. The first one, data can accumulate. If you can see in the left part of the slide, you will see the feedback loop. So, and in the right part of the slide, you can see a story of a company that developed an app. It goes to the farmers, to the one farm or two farms. The farmer is using the data, start this way giving back byproducts, data to the application. The data can help the application provider reduce the uncertainty. And that means that it's possible for him to improve the services, which is something good. I mean, you can have a better prediction of when you have to do something. That's the better decision that the farmer can take, or the agronomist. And that means that the moment that the agribusiness is able to provide good services with good quality, immediately he can attract more customers, and more customers, which are actually the farms, generate more data, and this is go long. It's a loop. And what is the why this is important? Because the feedback loop and the ability also of the data, not the ability, but actually the fact that they can depreciate, means the data, they can use their value. So it's not how many data we have. The right question is, what is the current value of our data? Because the value of the data can be reduced related to the context, to the decision. I will give you an example. If you have weather data and you want to make a prediction, the history of the data for the last 5 years are very valuable for your model. But if you want to give an advice to the farmer when he has to spray, you don't need the data that exists for the last 5 years actually do not have the same value. So, and another thing, I remember it was 2017-15, I was in the same room and we're discussing about the code of conduct. And the discussion was the following. I think it still exists as a topic. The raw data, the data that we are managed to collect, it doesn't mean that gives you value immediately. You have to be able to transform your raw data to decision-ready data, and that means you need to have data governance. You need to clean the data, even in the AI era. In this period that everybody believes, okay, it doesn't matter, I will take the data, I will put them in an AI agent, immediately I will receive back results. It's not working like this. Actually, in the market, they are not seeking people who knows how to work with AI tools, but they are seeking people who knows how to work with our AI tools and also have the knowledge about the context, means the agronomic context in our condition, in our situation. So you need not only to have access to data, because we're talking a lot about access, but access is not enough. You need also to have the ability to transform the data to decision-ready data in order to be able to generate value. I will go fast to save time, okay? And another thing that it's important, the code of conduct to highlight and to prepare the actors when they have to enter in data relationships, it's related to the fact that in order to be able to generate value, you need something extra. you need, and I will use a word that Christopher don't like a lot, you need capital. And there are many different forms of capital. I mean, it's not only to have access, it's not only to know the decision you have to improve, it's not only to know how the mechanisms that generate value, and it's not only needed to be able to generate decision-ready data. You need also to have capital. You need to have technological capital, financial capital. You need to have human capital, which is very important and is related to the skills. And if you have two actors, you can see in the graph there are two actors. In the left part, you have someone who is the farmer, and he's a data originator, but he does not have the capital. So he can get part of the benefit. He may have access to all this data, but in reality, he cannot do anything. And the other actor who has the capital, he has the technology ability, and also has a strategy to position himself and in order to be able to get advantage of the value of the data that he can manage, he's in a better position. So this, it's related to asymmetry. Okay, it's an asymmetry. It's a clear asymmetry. So when we're discussing about small farms or medium farms, that's the reason this asymmetry exists. That's why they don't have the same bargaining power. And this is related to the platform. And it was funny because Christopher told me yesterday that I have to stay simple. And he started his presentation with the book. And he used this amazing term about the platforms and how the platform trap the people, and immediately so it's more or less, it's something similar. This is a graph from an amazing guy called Porter. I really like him, and this article is, you are not the only one who can share information about books. I can also do it. So if you have time, read this article. It's from, I think it's 1987. And it's explained about how you can create your strategy and beat your rivals. And this is very relevant to what we are discussing now. Because imagine that you are a platform, and because you are aware of the accumulation ability of the data, of the feedback loop, you have invested, you have the capital, and after a while you have managed to generate services, which is something good. I mean, good service for the farmers, it's positive, but you also have the ability, without the existence of code of conduct or legislation, to create some barriers for new enters. I mean, someone who has developed a new application and he wants to use the data, but you don't let him because you create the lock-in event and this kind of things. But you also have the ability to use your power to the supplier and to the buyers, which is in reality in the agri-food, it's the same, because the farmer, I think this is what Stephanie presented, the farmer exists in both sides. I mean, you also provide data, your byproducts goes to the platform, but you're also the one who's receiving back the services. So this is how it works. That's why the small or medium farms, they are in a position that is, let's say, not favored. And this is something that the code of conduct should treat and also should be able to inform how it works. And about the data exchange, most of the time, also in agriculture, but in general, you start with an application, as I mentioned, and you feel that the app is for free. But in reality, it's not for free. I mean, you are using something because you are giving your data. And again, I'm returning back to the years that I'm working in Greece. I had several discussions about this with the farmers. It was the period that we are developing and we are piloting the services. So it was needed for us to collect data in order to build models. And the farmers, because again, I believe that they're very well informed, told them, okay, I will give you the data. You can use my field, you can use my data, but I know that in 2 years from now, you will return back and say, it's no longer a free service, you will have to pay. So I will refuse, I'm not going to do it. So, and it was difficult for me to convince him because it's about business. Probably at the end of the day, we'll have to return with a pricing model after developing the services. So, and another important thing that the code of conduct is dealing, and Alexandra mentioned, is related to the future value of data. Because we are thinking that the value of data remains stable, but in reality it's not. The value of data, the immediate benefit we're receiving now, it's not similar to the benefit that, to the value of the data in few years from now. And this is something that, this is how the platforms are working in reality. They accumulate data, but the value of data, the future value of data is higher. I really like Hobbit. I was traveling with an aeroplane for 40 hours, going back and return. And I have the opportunity to see Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. I create this slide, and I need from you if it is possible to give me an answer to this enigma, or what you can give away, still keep it, and yet fear to lose. You don't like Hobbit, huh?
No, your data.
It's data, yeah. So yeah, it's data. So the data are not physical goods, and this has an impact because some actors are refusing to share data. And the question is, okay, if you share your data, you still have your data. Why you are refusing to share your data? Because you probably will use your competitive advantage. That's the reason behind. It's not that if you will use your exclusivity. The moment that you share your data, maybe another actor will come, use the data, and generate a better service than you. So this is also related to the code of conduct and the lock-in effect, and what is the logic behind why the doors are closed. This is also from Hobbit. And about the value of data, there is not only one value. Usually, you remember, Stephanie, they were coming and say, what is the value of my API? Okay, that was my motivation. Yeah, there is a market price, the price that you can record in a transaction. Usually it's very low or zero. The real value exists in the economic value. And it's also related with the context, the actor, and the use case. Again, the same data do not have the same value for all the actors. And the value of data depends on the decision and the context. So the economic value, it's something that you have to sit, you have to consider your organization, your abilities, your scope, your strategy, and then to end up to the economic value. It's not coming indirectly. The accounting value, I'm going to skip it, and most important, the societal value. But Christopher, because you waste my time, I'm not going to speak about this. That's your punishment. And after this, and again, from my experience, because we go there with European projects and with technology, but we see in action and we complain and say, okay, it's not logical. No, in action is not always irrational, because we don't have a way to realize the value. The financial justification is not easy to be done, and there are not many tools that you can use. It's something that we have to consider. The rights and the future use, usually it's not something that we discuss a lot. There is unclear value return, and there is a fear of dependency, especially from the farmers and leadership. But this is another. And I will stop with a suggestion. It's a data value reflection principle. It's related to the code of conduct that Alexandra and Christopher presented today. The code of conduct should not make assumptions, should not start with assumption, should start with questions. And we have to prepare the actors. We have to speak about the purpose, the benefit, as Stephanie mentioned, the reuse. We have to speak about portability. This is very important, the rights, all the things that Alexandra presented today. And this is how we can support the actors take decisions before getting into data relationships. And another thing, and that's the last slide, Nikos, I don't think that the maturity of the digitalization is related to the amount of data, because I'm also hearing about how many data we are exchanging. It's related to the value, the benefits, and the clarity. So you have a maturity ecosystem when the actors are able to, with clarity, to realize and deal with the benefits, the values, the risk. And another thing is related to the public purpose. So I will speak about this, Christopher. This is another value, the most important one, especially at this period. It's the economic and social sustainability. And if you have time after the end, I'm going to share you my experience from my latest trip in Singapore, in which way they are using the data to generate public value or for sustainability. What is the model do they have there, but also what is happening in China and the discussion in the United States. Thank you.
We're running late, so just one question from the floor. Anybody has a comment or question? Stephanie.
Thanks, Panos. I really like your presentation, and what I appreciate most is your business point of view, because I think it's very relevant for this discussion. We can propose a code of conduct that is very farmer-centric, and I love farmers. I'm married to one, but we have to also take into account the benefits of the other stakeholders, and this is what your presentation is very useful for that. So also have a look at other stakeholders along the food chain and realize that they need the data and they also make profit out of it, but they also invest in this processing. So thanks for the presentation.
It's not only about you understand the financial justification. Yeah, I just focus in my presentation, but it's more about this.
All right, thank you very much. We're now moving to the panel discussion. I'd like to invite Francesco and Doris and Sam and Peter and Filippo to come up here. Sit across there. Hopefully there are enough changes. Yeah, I'm just changing the slides.
On stage, then
why? Because we don't see one. There is Teams. Here we are. Okay, so thank you very much, panelists, for coming to this final discussion. We've asked each of you to have a particular topic, and you've got about 5 minutes at most to discuss it briefly. And then we'll have an open discussion as to both what the earlier presentations raised and what your comments in response raised. So I'll take it one by one. So Francesco, do you want to start for us, please?
Yes, thanks a lot. Maybe, yes, the topic of discussion is indeed to see how this code of conduct can fit into the overall work that at institutional level, and in particular at the Commission, we are putting forward also for the future. And I think one of the great things about the development of the code of conduct is the fact that it brings around the table different actors. So it's really a moment of reflection of how the needs of different actors can be accommodated. Of course, in DG Agri, we greatly support the fact that farmers are at the center of this conversation, but we also would like to see how, let's say, a code of conduct can, let's say, facilitate the establishment of this relationship between industry players, farmers, but even bring benefits for the research world. So to see how the exchange of data can lead to the development of new solutions, for example. And as you pointed out in your presentation when talking about hard and soft infrastructure, I mean, Farmtopia is one of the projects that we finance in this field, but there are many others. So we will for sure continue on supporting, let's say, digitalization, not as an aim, a final goal for the whole sector, but as an opportunity for farmers, also through research, especially to demonstrate what can be done with this data, how this can translate into solutions for different actors in the farming sector. We have launched, also this was briefly introduced before, a large partnership focusing on data, which started in October, which is currently relying on a large amount of use cases to see also how initiatives that are currently implemented at a more local level can be capitalized to generate EU added value. So connecting actors across the EU to generate also EU-wide data sets to see how also let's say, in this case, both quantity and the quality of the data can lead to improved solutions. So let's say I talk about research because I'm not a lawyer. I will not enter into the technicalities of the legal aspects of the regulatory framework, but from a research perspective, for sure, we believe that having a code of conduct facilitating the sharing of data is for sure very useful. In the next MFF, I see a lot of potential also for digitalization of agriculture, despite many things are still under discussion from the budget, but also the scope and the way this will be implemented in the future, but is for sure a topic and a trend that is not we are not changing direction. I don't perceive also, let's say, in the corridors of DG Agri, I don't perceive any stepping back from looking at digitalization to solve sectorial issues. So it is important that we continue working on these enablers, including having a regulatory but also self-regulatory framework for contracts in data sharing.
Thank you very much. I next asked Filippo Ranga from Polimi to talk about how this interacts with business models, if at all.
Yeah, by definition, for sure. Yeah, we have seen that digitalization affected business models, processes, and so on. And now we are facing a new wave of innovation driven by AI, okay? And let me say, I'm used to say that no, I used to say no data, no AI. Without data, you have stupid AI. So if you own the data and you are able to use it, because the most important thing is to use the data, you can create value and business model and things like that. But why we are discussing a code of conduct? Because with digitalization, we experienced an imbalance in the value chain, okay? And with AI, we will experience a tougher unbalance situation between the farmers, the weak part of the value chain, and the stronger. And so it's necessary to give the conduct ways in order to the weaker part of the value chain, so the farmers, to exploit the value of data. Okay, that's the point that we have to keep in mind. And we can create, we have experienced many new business models, but you can create it without owning the original factor or that can create the business model. So I think we need a code of conduct, and probably, I don't know, Alexandra, if we need or a new version of the code of conduct considering the wave of AI, okay? Because it's a tough situation, because we have new situation we will face. Let me say that in order to drive new business models and opportunities, improvement in processes, because with data you can skip some step or time things in your activities, also administrative activities. I have an example of a farmer that is angry with his software provider providing the software in order to manage the invoices, okay, because he is not able to receive the data about his invoices. In this, using those invoices is possible using just ChatGPT to create a balance sheet or a profit and loss. It can't. So my last point, I want to save some time, is maybe we can also exploit what is already in place, because that software provider must provide the data. Based on what? AI Act. Okay, AI Act is something that is already in place that can create new business models, and then could be also enabled by code of conduct and so on. But probably we have a lot of things that we can already create also in terms of business models and so on.
Thank you very much. I then asked Sam Emerson to talk about, well, basically whether the digitalization of agriculture is overall a good idea at all, whether this should be questioned.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having me on this panel. It's indeed a very topical question today. And believe it or not, one that might be difficult for me to give a yes or no answer to. So if we understand where we are with digitalization, I think we're all aware it's happening. We're in the middle of this fourth industrial revolution, as Umberto mentioned. So it's happening whether we like it or not. And so this is a reality that we have to face. I understand that this panel discussion is about data sharing specifically, but when we talk about digitalization, I think it's from the perspective of Copa Cogeca, representing rural communities, something that, so it's for us, it's not just about drones, it's not just about AI, it's also about, in some cases, the infrastructure for a basic broadband connection, which is still lacking in many parts of Europe. And so I think when we're talking about digitalization, we need different tests and so on for different use cases. We also, as a European member organization, we represent members who themselves represent different national contexts, different geographical contexts, different cultural contexts. So for this reason, it's important that we are quite nuanced when we address this sort of conversation. I think a really important thing that's been mentioned today is that when we talk about digitalization, it's important not to look at digitalization for the sake of it. We need to see the actual concrete benefits for the farmers. And that might be, for example, regulatory compliance. So for example, there are certainly risks when it comes to handing over usage of data owned by the farmer, because of course that can, for us, represent an unfair trading practice. On the other hand, asking a small farm to complete a data request on sustainability data, so for example, corporate sustainability reporting, that's also quite daunting. So these are the sorts of questions that we have to balance when we're talking about this. Also, for example, when we're talking about economic sustainability, affordability is really important. So I think it's important to understand that not every process necessarily needs a platform, and not every solution needs to always be the most sophisticated, complicated, or expensive one. For us, we represent many farms across Europe which are facing extreme economic pressures. And so we're not really in a position to always recommend something just because it requires a massive investment. Sometimes actually that's a reason for us not to support that, especially when we're also dealing with funding pressures as well. For us, the fact that this code of conduct is geared towards small farms is really important, given that many of the challenges covering digitalization disproportionately affect small farms, who often have weaker bargaining power in the value chain. They often lack the training and resources to utilize data even when they are in own possession of it. So this is why, for us, we also represent agricultural cooperatives. Reinforcing this role is essential. I could talk about this all morning, but I'm aware that we're getting hungry, so I'll start wrapping up. For us, the code of conduct is a really important aspect of ensuring trust, which is essential for facilitating effective digitalization of the agricultural sector. This includes interoperability, it includes choice, and in short, for us, digitalization needs to be practical, proportionate, farmer-centered, and the goal is not new technology for its own sake, but more resilient farms. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. I then asked Peter Paré from ZLTO to give his perspective on the trajectory that we have here in digitization, given that he's been around for quite a while. He knows how it was and perhaps how it will, where it's going.
Well, what we saw in the last few years was the platforms that Stephanie mentioned. They were all started only within the last 10 years, and they had quite a difficult start. For example, to take out the human factor was important. It took, for joint data, it took 1 or 2 years extra to reprogram everything to get it all organized in safety by design. And that was important. But at the same time, we see the importance of keeping the human factor in it, because Stephanie just told that the day after Ascension Day was an important day to have all the results on CO2 in Belgium, in Flanders at least. And then they had to work all that day, because although it was bank holiday, it was really important to match all the questions that were raised. So you can never take out all the human factor, but you can just get it in balance. That's about platforms. That's one thing. They are new, they are developing, and they are now at the same time interconnecting. Quite a challenging job. In the arable sector, you see the importance of the ICT of the data. Before, a few years ago, it was important to have data just for your management or whatever. The management programs were working on that. Now it's really important for your clarification for the regulations. You said people opt out of CAP, so that's a reason not to use the data. But at the same time, you see, for example, if someone wants to use a spraying agent, which is prohibited now for general use, but you can still use it for spot spraying. Then, because that's simple, you only need really very little bit. But to clarify that you did spot spraying, you need quite sophisticated tools to show that you did it. So that's for fertilization, for crop protection, for water management. I think the level of data that you need and that you need to have your hands on is growing on that level. You see the scaling. You invited me in a project about small farmers, and I come from the bigger farmers, although they are big in turnover, but they are poor in income. A farmer lives poor and dies rich, but well, that's we cannot change that. The digitalization gave a lot of possibility for the scale. What we see in the last every 6 years in my environment, the dairy farmers double in size. And that's only possible because of the data they have. And if they can manage that properly, and for example, the milking robots, they in fact, one important thing to work with them, but that's also with the normal milking parlors. There, the data facilitates a big herd. And I think that's something, when you cannot miss data, then you really use it. And very big arable farmers must use it. People with many workers in strawberry in my region also, they must use it. But if you have a smaller farm, you can still invite to use it, but then you will see that at the end you are also in the scaling difficulties like everyone.
Thank you very much. And finally, but definitely not least, Doris, we asked you to talk about how likely this code of conduct is going to be adopted, but from an European Commission kind of regulatory perspective, to what extent does it contradict rules that already exist? To what extent does it fit with things like the Data Act and that sort of thing? I mean, is it compatible, let's say?
So thank you.
Or can you change the rules for us?
No, that I can certainly not. So me personally, certainly not. But first, let me thank for the cooperation of the projects also in this workshop. I think it's great. You mentioned at the beginning one important aspect, your research project, capacities are limited. So I think it's very important that projects and European initiatives cooperate, and then that also joint efforts, let's say the joint efforts are bundled to really create the impact needed, because we see, for instance, communication efforts and so on are essential, and one single project is very likely not to manage it. And even probably an organization like Copa-Cogeca would be challenged to make the communication efforts on the ground alone, if not all, bundle the efforts, for instance, as it regards legal interpretation, preparing the material, and so on. So, and so far, first of all, thank you for this. As we now looking at the code of conduct, I think what is important there also, not to have too many code of conducts. So I think if we look at the market structures, for sure, farmers have different needs. And we will have you mentioned that you clearly differentiated, Stephanie, between code of conduct model contracts, and so on. The model contracts, they are very likely to vary between the different types of farms. There we need to have adjustment. We maybe have a basic model for farmers in general, but we need an adjustment for whether you have a dairy farm or a crop farm, so that will vary. But for the code of conduct, if we would confuse farmers with different code of conducts, and if we want to have the buy-in of the actors along the value chain, you refer to the big companies. They will not commit to several code of conduct, probably not. So insofar, first of all, also considering that the value chains are across borders, it would be in a set if we would have a European level code of conduct, and ideally not too many, not to confuse farmers, and join efforts also in the communication. So personally speaking, avoiding fragmentation and making, let's say, communication efforts really targeted to the farmers, let's say, are two prerequisites to making a code of conduct effective. And then, for sure, in the development, it is essential to involve the different parties, because if they would not accept a code of conduct, then it's worthless. So meaning, for sure, the opinions vary, and it's probably a diplomatic and negotiation effort, but that is the basis then for the cooperation. And I think what is still needed to highlight the added value potentially also for the other side of the coin. We have some manufacturers. What is the added value of a code of conduct for them, for instance? So just let me name one example. If each farmer would come under the Data Act and make a claim to a certain data authority, the manufacturers might be challenged as well. Similarly, with agrochemical providers. So there the market is a little bit more limited than with the agtech manufacturers, but also there might be advantages from their side to have a code of conduct in place. It could also ease their life. So, and here, we cannot in a panel discussion go into detail of each article. That is not there. But the key advantages which I see in terms of a code of conduct, it is more flexible, it is more adjustable to technology advancement. It can also help to make the interpretation of legislation sector specific. So, and fine tune there and to complement. And it also always have opportunity to go beyond legislation. So to make stricter requirements or to sharpen it, to have more clarity in a sector specific context. So particularly if you're now thinking about small farms, they would probably benefit from a, let's say, sharpened interpretation of certain provisions in the Data Act. And that is a question of negotiation, for instance. You see now that the Commission is also challenged. We have already, before certain elements of the AI Act enter into force, an omnibus on the AI Act. With the Data Act, right from the beginning, we said we have early review clauses because we expected that, first of all, we have to build on the experiences with legislation and collect and gain experiences. And on the other side, we also have, in particular in the field of AI, and that was mentioned here, very small, let's say, very speedy developments we have to take into consideration. And here, I think the, let's say, dimension of AI, as mentioned earlier, I totally agree, is very essential to be mentioned, to not to ignore it, how it will change the power balances. Those actors with data will succeed very quickly. And we can name here different examples along the value chain, but you may also across the globe and look, for instance, the newly published agriculture strategy of China. So one priority is AI. So, and there is a question whether data sharing is always voluntary. So that I think also needs to be discussed in a European context if you talk about competitiveness and sustainability. Data sharing can help with both. And I think that is an important dimension as well. And I think there it's about a question of being quick. At the moment in agriculture, Europe is strong and still can set European standards. But if, let's say, data is distributed inequally, the competitiveness advantage is very strong, also in developing AI-based solution. And the information and the algorithms influence also the production patterns in farming. So if, let's say, only one company would have the power to or would dominate on the market, it also informs the algorithms, for instance, for spraying and so on and so forth. So, and that is, I think, a risk which has to be reflected and has to be discussed as well. And the foundation for this is data. So from the Commission side, I can inform for DG Connect and DG Agri, also linking to the discussion of the request for multiple app. I think it was a very feasible example which was provided one farmer with 20 apps. So we proposed in the so-called Apply AI strategy, a so-called App Store or platform for, let's say, applications for farmers or actors along the value chain. And one element I would like to add here to really achieve an impact and mobilize the farmers to make use of certain digital technologies, also the smaller ones, I would add the dimension of B2G, business to government data sharing and government to business data sharing. Because if it's really as interoperable between not only the business applications, but also between the B2G applications, it would even be more attractive for the farmers and smarter to use it. I know that, for instance, in Flanders, you already achieve it and foster it, but I still would like to highlight it, to think it in the concept of any code of conduct, that also this angle, even if governments would not enter into a code of conduct which is between business and businesses, but in the development of a data space, in the development of an app store for farmers, this can be considered and is an essential cornerstone, because the colleagues from DG Agri may compliment here, but we know how much data flows and administrative work is still related, for instance, to the common agriculture policy. We have a lot of data and administrative burden in B2B, let's say, relations, but also in B2G relations. If we have it in one package, it would be ideal. So some reflections to stimulate the discussion. I don't want to occupy it, but happy to follow up.
Thank you very much. Now we open both the floor to the audience, but also to all of you to react to each other. I'm seeing here certain themes coming out quite clearly. Sam is saying, well, the digitization is inevitable. There's not much we can do. Peter is saying, look, the use of data is doubling the farm size over time. And Filippo is talking about the impact of AI. So let me make a provocative suggestion. I predict in 20 years' time there will be 4 big players in European agriculture who will vertically integrate both the farms, the processing, all the way up to just before the retail. So it'll be big players like Danone or Nestle or somebody similar, or maybe Google or Amazon, who just own the whole vertical. And buy out 80% of existing farms as a result. Why will this not happen?
Yeah, tough question, definitely, but it could happen because we are used to look in the future, and digitalization and mainly AI is creating oligopolies by definition. But if the farmers are smart, or at least the union of farmers are smart, could be able to avoid this scenario. That scenario is happen in the advertising industry with Google. Okay, in some way in retail with the Amazon and things like that. Of course, agriculture is more complex, so that's good. Agriculture is more physical because you have the fields and so on. But if you are able to aggregate, cooperate, if you have to face together the challenges, you can avoid that scenario. Because I take something that you said. In the digital arena, how many big farmers do we have? Okay, we are all as a farmer, we are all small. Okay, no one can compete with the guys that are providing AI. No one can compete with the guys that are able to elaborate data and so on. So that's a scenario, possible scenario, if you are stupid or you are not able to cooperate or work together to face it. Okay, or at least, let me say, exploit very well the Data Act, because right now, only with the Data Act, you can create many hundreds of opportunities. But you must know that you can explain in the right way and so on.
Anybody else want to react or respond?
No, it's a very provocative question indeed, and one that I suppose, given my job, I have to reply to. I think the physical nature of agriculture has been mentioned as a sort of distinction, separating it from other industries. There's, of course, issues of land ownership, and what we see for me is, well, what I see is sort of as an obstacle to what you're proposing would be the political feasibility. I'm sure we all remember in the Netherlands, so for example, attempts to close farms because of nitrogen emissions and the impact that that had on national politics at that level. And I'm trying to be careful with how I word this, but
Don't worry, nobody's listening. Go on.
I know, but my director is, and I'm not sure how willing millions of farmers would be to sell up, I suppose. So I'm a little bit skeptical about this proposition, but it's not that we are opposed necessarily to amalgamation. We, of course, we represent cooperatives as well, and so in order for them to compete, they do have to grow bigger. We encourage smaller farmers to join up and to increase their bargaining power. But to the level where we end up with like Danone and the level of agriculture across the whole of Europe, I'm not sure. So that's what I would say.
Peter,
I think it's important here to know who is your enemy and who is your who you can work with. My personal opinion is the way we worked with the machine companies, that they are our allies instead of our opponents, because they are not that big that they can take over everything. And they could be an alternative to the big tech, who is really where you see the business models that really take over. I'm not afraid that the farms will be taken over, because they are the companies will say we don't earn enough. Let the risk be at the farmers. Let them do what we want, and that's the main risk. And that's, if you don't collaborate, if you don't join, then you take that risk.
Doris.
I think you raised a very interesting question. You mentioned the allies, but then I think we also have to make the market scenario for the manufacturers. So, and then follow the last 20 years. So at the moment, they are still, European manufacturers are still strong, but the development of the market structures from the manufacturers and the shares are not, let's say, equal 20 years ago. So I think also there is a trend to be observed, and then you may decide yourself. So I will not judge on it. I only observe the market structures. But I think also there you find a consolidation, what is to be described as that, and it's not only within Europe. So also there the shares are varying, and that means also that maybe the culture would change if the shares are changing. So I think that is only a reflection, and I think the example from Danone was very valid. So just to name another example from another sector, where you have, and there is, I'm quoting now, reportage from the so-called Handelsblatt, a German economic magazine. There you had an investigation saying, okay, Danone and so on, the shares in the bet providers, so the veterinarians. So they buy in the veterinarians step by step, and then they determine the prices in certain countries already. So that is similarly the evolutions without data, but because of scale effects. So I think it's still a very valid question to raise, and particularly if you see the manufacturers as allies. So because manufacturers also there, they have to compete. They have to compete in the development of AI. They have to, let's say, have the prices in the machinery. And farmers might be tempted also to buy in from third countries if the prices for a tractor are much lower. So I think I would see it a little bit more differentiated and a little bit more carefully, and then really analyze the different market structures along the value chain globally.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I asked this question is because in every other economic sector that has got digitized, and we can go back all the way to the period of the invention of the telegraph in the 1840s, 1850s. If you look at telegraph, telephone, radio, television in the 20s and 30s, cable television in the 50s and 60s, all the way up to the internet in the last 20 years, you see this first initial period of about 20 years where 1,000 flowers bloom. There are lots and lots of little companies. You think, how wonderful, this amazing ecosystem, etc., etc. And then for very, very simple, basic business reasons, because of reasons of scale, little by little, they get bought out one by one. You buy your neighbor, you buy your bigger neighbor, etc., etc. And over a 20-year period, you get consolidated to 3, 4. And that's purely in the digitization area. Equally, we've seen in agriculture, the last 20 years has seen a huge consolidations on the inputs, pesticide side, on the fertilizer side, on the seed manufacturer side. So you've already got a big movement of consolidation there. That's why I'm throwing this on the table as being unless we take a very strategic, and I don't think Filippo's argument, well, we all have to collaborate better to defend ourselves, will work. I think we have to take a much more muscular view, a much more, what kind of agriculture, food production system do we want 20 years from now? The European Commission has to sit down, discuss it, and put in the structures that will lead there. Otherwise,
no, indeed, I agree with this point. There are, of course, many policy instruments to, let's say, avoid this type of concentration, especially taking into account the role that the farmers have, not only in terms of production of food and other products, but also their role within the realm of, let's say, the function they have in rural areas and in defending the territory. So, of course, it's not only a matter of the capacity of produce, but the desirability of having a few actors that, let's say, owns a large amount of lands and have a different approach also to the territory. Yeah.
I think we've got an online question. Tyler?
Yes, thank you. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for a very interesting event to all the speakers. But I think one thing that has only been touched on a little bit, and I know it will sound quite idealistic. Maybe first, just to introduce myself, I'm from IFOAM Organics Europe, but more sharing a personal view. So maybe idealistic, but Umberto talked about the, education and training aspect a little bit, but I really think that when you look long term, it's not just in agriculture, but for a well-educated and citizenry, like the training in these digital skills and growing up, maybe knowing somewhat of how to code and how to use, how to analyze, how to use data is not something that's impossible for farmers, and at least future farmers, sort of linking it with generational renewal. So how much, should that be part of the conversation of, with newer entrants coming in, we want them to be able to, at least maybe in a cooperative, some of the people are very, very data and tech savvy, and they could use the data themselves, like maybe within I'm thinking in a more local area. So that's the question or proposal I want to bring to the table. Thanks again.
Peter, you want to say something?
I think it's not only a matter of education of the farmers themselves, but it's a complete AKIS, Agricultural Knowledge and Innovation System, which you need here to get really working and really interactive in each country. And there is still a lot to be done also in the next CAP period.
Umberto, do you want to say something? And with that, bring the meeting to a close, because I see that it's 1 o'clock.
Yes, first of all, in reaction to this last intervention from if I'm online, yes, definitely, this is, in our opinion, a massive needs. We need to cope with the upskilling of the farming community, and certainly, once again, the cooperative can play a huge role in there, or providing services that can be developed in-house. Which brings me also to your provocation regarding the consolidation element. Definitely, I see that we might need to go in that direction where there will be only few players operating if we let the market there. Nevertheless, there are like tools to counteract this development in terms of, let's say, food value chain, but also data value chains. And once again, cooperatives can play a role. We use the example of Danone. Recently, a big merge between two cooperatives have been approved to counteract those effects between Ireland and the German DMK. So it's a way to keep the assets in the hands of farmers and fight big players. And this would happen also in the digital world. And on top of that, cooperative, they have also the possibility to cooperate with other cooperatives in different sectors. And there are initiatives, for instance, in the United States, where based on principle number 6, cooperation among cooperatives, they are creating a cooperative digital platform. And this is really like a democratization of data ownership and value creation, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. Well, I want to thank all the members of the panel and all the speakers earlier on today. Much appreciated. I thought this was very, very interesting, very stimulating. Thank you very much, everybody.